We're on?
Okay, first order of business is a public hearing on a special amusement permit for Bentley Warren DBA Bentley Saloon LLC for live music, singing, and dancing, currently located at 1601 Portland Road. Anybody has any comments? Bring any matters to the attention of the board with respect to this application? Now's the time. Never have any fun with these colors. Okay, I'll close the public hearing then. And move on to our regular meeting, which we begin with a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, then to approve the agenda, anything to add?
No, sir.
Anybody else?
Make the motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Public forum, if anyone wishes to bring a matter to the attention of the board that is not already on our agenda, the floor is open. Anybody?
They
Okay.
want to talk to us.
Moving right along. Minutes of April 14th.
Looks good to me. I'll make the motion to approve as written. Second.
All in favor? Carries. Any committee and board reports here?
Right. Very dull roar.
Yeah.
Selectmen Du Bois, do you have a planning board report?
They didn't meet, there was no quorum.
Was going to address that issue. The planning board will meet May 8th at 7 p.m. in the ML Day School Library. They failed to reach a quorum at the last meeting, so this will be the third time that the the third time that the Cape's Butter Dairy Barn will be on the agenda for the planning board. Hopefully, they'll be able to hear the application on the 8th. Unfortunately, two of the board members are abutters and they can't act on those that application. So, 7 p.m. on the 8th.
We hope. Okay, new business then. Consider approval of a renewal of a special amusement permit for Bentley Saloon, property located at 1601 Portland Road.
Code officer and deputy sheriff find no reason not to approve this application.
Then I make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor then? This is Bentley's night here on the agenda. Moving on to his,
Trying to get everything on one meeting.
probably an efficient way to do it. Liquor license application for Bentley's Saloon LLC. This is a renewal as well, same location.
Once again, code enforcement officer and deputy sheriff find no reason not to approve this application.
Move to approve.
All in favor? Copy that. And then thirdly, the selectmen to review and consider the authorization for the town manager to send a letter of approval for Bentley Saloon, request for permission to consume alcohol in the parking areas listed on the map provided and for dates listed on the letter provided. All in our agenda package.
We do like to make this agenda items as long as possible, Mr. Chair. This is the same, basically the same blanket letter of approval as the board has signed for the past few years. The areas to be utilized on the exterior of the building are indicated on the map in the heavy black line. And that is for the dates indicated and the aside statement.
We have a number of dates running from yesterday. No. To Saturday, October 11th, a variety of events. If anybody has any interest in that. Okay,
Motion. Yeah, motion to,
authorize the town manager to
Yeah.
send that request, send that, letter to the Bureau of Alcohol.
I'll second that.
All in favor of that?
You don't have the letter?
No, I'll sign the letter. I
We'll sign that.
draft it, I'll just copy the letter I gave last year.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is for the Eagles, okay.
Right. Next item is to consider approval and signing blanket letter of approval for a license to operate games of chance for the fraternal order of Eagles. Is that 4030s?
That's their, yes.
Designation 4030 pursuant to 17 MRS, section 1832, sub 4. This is kind of something we do every year, I think.
Yes, it is, this is an annual renewal.
Then I'll make a motion that we approve that.
Second.
All in favor of that?
Did you put the liquor license on?
Yes, it's here.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see any, I missed the sign. Thank you.
Okay, the next item then is to sign the warrant notice of election bond for RSU 21 budget valuation and bond referendum pursuant to 20A MRS section 1486 to be held, that is the election to be held on Tuesday, June 10th, 2014.
They are going to coincide the election, the referendum for the school budget with the state primary and municipal elections.
Finally.
Finally. Finally. So unfortunately, the only thing is we're signing the warrant to approve, is basically so I can get the ballots ready, because otherwise they still have not done the final budget meeting or anything like that, or the public hearing, but this is just so we can get the ballot out there.
I don't think they've set the date for the public meeting. Have they?
19th, May 19th.
Okay, all right.
And I believe that's going to be, I think it's going to be the same night. I think they're going to hold the public hearing in the RSU open budget meeting together on the 19th of May. So you're just basically countersigning the warrant so that we can hold the election, the referendum election.
Then I make a motion, we do that.
Second.
Yep.
Made second. Any further discussion, questions? All in favor?
All of those?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Get your signing hand ready,
But
going.
one's extra. Wait until after if you want to do it.
Read my handwriting.
Start slow.
We'll burn that pen out, yeah.
Are these ballots gonna be by machine?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
The other towns want them by machines, so. actually gonna give the municipal ones by machine because it's one fee to program the machine, so whether they're programming just the RSU or they're programming the RSU and the town, it's per machine, not per question. So for the cost of the ballot printing, it's not worth, running two separate.
Wonderful. So all of our ballot, everything we vote on is gonna be per machine. And then our town meeting's the next night, right?
You'll be installing chips in everyone's head, so that they don't even have to come next year.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that being done, moving on to the next item is review and provide recommendations for any additional changes to the proposed Town of Arundel addressing ordinance for inclusion at the June town meeting.
I have made the changes under administration in regards to the fire chief, public works director, and road commissioner to work in conjunction with the addressing officer. I was highly discouraged by many municipal managers in regards to placing language there that might incite a challenge in regards to inappropriate or possible hate speech language on signs. If the board is still in favor of doing that, I will have that language, I'll create that language and add it in. But several municipalities, Somerset County, who does a lot of the unorganized territory, said they spent a fair amount of legal fees on trying to come up with language that would discourage such a thing. Their reasoning is that the signs in the unorganized territories get stolen a lot more than regular signs, and like I said, we have a problem here as well. But their attorneys had discouraged them as well because it might invite people to challenge that part of the ordinance. But I would be more than willing to come up with some sort of language that ran parallel to what they were going to propose if the board would like to still have that in there. I feel that we can objectively deny the blatant disregard for any type of decency, I guess you'd say. But that was what the recommendation was to me.
I just raised the issue.
Oh, I completely understand, and I just wanted to make sure, and that was the biggest, the overarching concern of all this. We have what's known as the listserv, and all the managers in the state that are part of Maine Town and City Management Association have an email, like a group email service, and the overwhelming majority of the managers said they had considered it and were recommended not to do it because of that reason. So I feel that whether the language is there or not, if somebody is going to introduce it, it could be challenged, and we may end up being challenged more often than not by having that language there. Might get put that thought in somebody's head that maybe I want to name it this and see if I can get away with it. So, the code enforcement officer did say that in the building code there is a stipulation that the numbers have to be on the house or on the residence structure of any type, so that will be added to his checklist of certificate of occupancy requirements. So there's no need to add that language to this because it's already addressed elsewhere.
Anybody else have any questions?
And just so you know, the remainder of the municipalities in the state of Maine adopted this ordinance in 1994. Yes, it was a model ordinance in 94.
We wanted to see how it worked out.
Because it's going our way.
So we'll just need a motion to include this on the warrant, I guess.
That is correct.
Yes, moved.
All in favor? The next item is to review and provide recommendations of percentage seasonal cottages tip funds to be dedicated as revenue to the town general fund if approved at the town meeting. We have some new numbers here.
Yes, if you can just focus on the first page that's marked 6G. Those last two columns will show you the difference here. Actually, the last three columns. The captured revenue to business project account, that's the same percentage that would go back to the seasonal cottages developers. Captured revenue to municipal projects accounts gives you an indication. These numbers aren't exact, but they're the numbers that are projected in the event that the project moves forward as expeditiously as planned. The first column would be the funds that would go into the town's account, the development projects account, and that second column is what would be returned to the general fund. So over the 25-year period, 4.975 million approximately would go to the development account for the town through the TIF, and then the general fund would be credited 5 million and some change. If we were to go, the breakdown doesn't work exactly the same, but it would be 50% to the developer, 25 to the town, 25 to the general fund. We can change that to be 50% to the developer, 35 to the town, 15 to the general fund. I guess that's the direction that how does the board feel about the 5 million as opposed to the 10 million that was discussed before to go into the municipal project account? I know that there was, if you recall, some discussion about it being more palatable of a project and more likely for the TIF to gain some traction if there was some readily definable benefit to the residents in general. And I think the easiest way to do that for the town as a whole is to show some money being deposited into the general fund to reduce the tax rate a little.
So how do those figures change if it's 35 and 15?
35 and 15, I, of course, knew you were going to ask that, Donald, when I brought it up. I can send you, I don't know exactly, there'll be about a 10% shift to the captured revenue municipal project account. So you'd be looking at, rather than the 21,000 in the first year, you'd be looking more at like 30,000. So there'd be a slight shift in favor of the project development account, which is what we'll discuss on the next agenda item, is depending on that percentage, the percentage that we use in these columns will indicate if there's a need to eliminate any of the items in the development project description. My feeling is that 3515 would be acceptable to the town. I think that shows that some of those funds are being placed into the general fund to be able to offset some of the tax rate. But in my opinion, a greater amount captured to the municipal project account would be more effective for the TIF district. It would allow us to get more done. Sewer rates and construction costs aren't going to get any less expensive, so that would give us a little bit more capital a little bit sooner to be able to start those projects if and when Kennebunk can begin accepting our sewage, should this move forward.
And how much, if we did 35 and 15, how much does that affect the savings that we get on our state revenue sharing and the county tax?
That would increase the savings that we get from the town by about 5 to 10%, because that is directly proportional to the ratios that we're putting into these accounts. If you look onto the next page, you can see where we're, all else remaining constant, the loss would be about $13,000 in that first year if you follow that down. That is the avoided cost of sheltering for the general aid, purpose aid to education. That's the cost of increased valuation, which increases county tax and decreases revenue sharing. Revenue sharing may or may not be a moot point at this point, but as of right now, that's what we have to go with. Who knows next year what's going to happen to revenue sharing.
How come this doesn't add up to at the 50% first page? Why doesn't the municipal number add up to the developer's number?
Because of the costs of sheltering, I believe. That would be, there's a difference of about $100,000.
Right.
That is the cost of the avoided, the cost that it costs the town to not shelter those funds. So as the money's going directly into the general fund, there's penalties for those, not penalties, but those costs are reduced. I mean, those benefits are reduced, so that amounts would change. That's why they vary.
So the next agenda item is development projects.
The projects that are, yes.
I'll wait.
but I think we ought to discuss whether the percentage
Right.
first.
Yeah,
and move on.
yeah,
That's
then
right,
we'll do
yeah,
that.
that's why I asked. I'll do that.
Personally, I think the 3515 is going to be more beneficial to the town. It's still going to give us funds going into the general fund, which we don't get from CMP TIF. But it's going to give us more to go towards those items on Route 1. And, I mean, those are some major items that I think the Economic Development Committee has also earmarked that they would like to see those projects go forward.
You'll definitely give us more options.
Yeah.
I know that, when we initially discussed this, and once again, I'm kind of speaking of the next agenda item, but when we initially discussed this, there were several projects that were brought before the board, and this was what was acceptable. We'll have to, reorganize that, and realizing, as we're doing this application, that the entirety of those projects aren't being completed, but we have the option to complete those projects with the funds that we end up receiving.
Yeah, those projects were, none of those projects really came through last, right? That was just projects that,
Tad and I had spoken to the engineers and just kind of come up with a list of things in that district that were options through a TIF. We realized that, the municipal industrial park or business park was probably far-fetched, sidewalks, lights, but they were all options of what we could do with those funds. Just to give the board something to think about.
Anybody else have any thoughts or preferences?
I kind of like it the way he's got it set up.
You have 50%? Or 25,
Right.
So now what I need to know is what the majority of you think.
I mean, it's nice to be able to go get some of these things, but,
In reality, how many of them are actually going to come to fruition?
right, and, I think.
And what time frame?
Exactly.
That's,
And we're looking at, we're looking at a 5 to 8 year time frame before we can even begin to do any of these projects, which,
so if you go down this in 5 to 8 years,
Exactly.
you got a pretty fairly substantial sum at that point.
Yeah.
And that's assuming we're still maintaining a 14, 15 mill rate. And,
There's a lot of variables
Right.
there.
I just think it's nice to be able to help as much as possible to stabilize in that way. So with that said, I would make a motion that we go with the split.
is there a second on that? Okay.
Another motion.
Jason, studying numbers.
All right.
I know, you study numbers until you're blue in the face.
This doesn't hurt us at all, just to reiterate what Velma, this doesn't do any tax shifting for us, money going into the general fund.
It doesn't technically hurt us, but there are benefits that are avoided by shifting it into those values in that last column on your first page aren't going to receive the benefit of sheltering from general purpose to education. So rather than the sum total of the $20 million being sheltered over the 25-year life, it'll actually be the $15 million being sheltered, and what's going into the general fund is treated like straight revenue. So according to the state, that's actual valuation that we have. So that would be taxed on the county level, that would be taxable by, it would be entered into the general purpose aid. So we would be, quote unquote, penalized on just directly putting those monies into the general fund. So they're not being sheltered. But that being, I'm sorry?
So we've got the money.
But you've got the money, that's exactly what I was gonna say, is that in the same breath, you've now got those funds readily available to use, rather than putting them in a fund to be used at a later date. So that benefit, in my opinion, in the community would offset the penalty for not sheltering those funds. I mean, there's a better chance with anything going into the general fund of this passing. And it's just how much of those funds the board would like to see placed into that development account.
Then I'll second his motion so we can discuss it
All
and
right.
decide.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Delayed second.
Well, I have to see the benefits, I mean, and versus, you know, what we lose in the general purpose age education and county taxes. But again, knowing that those funds will be in the general fund to cover those costs. Okay, yeah.
And it'll be a minimal impact, really, to the town as a whole. You're not going to see a huge difference by putting those funds into the general fund. And you're going to get the immediate benefit of those funds being there.
And being able to use them for anything we want.
Exactly, because it'll go straight towards the general fund, and those can be used, applied as revenues to reduce the mill rate. So it'll be just like new houses being built in town, we're capturing that value and actually using it, but we're also being taxed on that value by the county and the state.
So after year 6, you know, we'll be putting 200,000, you know, low 200,000 each year in a general fund.
Correct.
We'll be able to help offset Roger's budget, or,
5 cents on the mill rate. So, you know, if you want to look at it that way. Each penny on the mill rate generates $40,000.
Todd, is that money exempt on the TIF application itself? Can we now eliminate 5 million on the application because it's not?
It won't be considered as part of the TIF application because, yeah, so I guess exempt is what you call it because it's going to be our money. It won't go into that development account, it'll just go straight in. It'll be as though we're only valuing the properties, we're valuing the properties there at 100%, but giving them 75% reduction. So, yes, it will be exempt from the application. There'll be no strings attached to those.
To that money.
Yeah. Well, no strings attached to the, full extent of the law. So where we would be, I guess, another way to answer that is where we would be penalized for using TIF funding for police protection or for town hall buildings, things like that. None of those stipulations would apply to those.
That's how I meant to word it.
Yeah. I'll try to read you.
Any questions or comments, anyone? Okay, motion's been made by Dan, second by Delma, to basically adopt what is appearing on, as item labeled 6G on our packet here.
And this is your recommendation.
My recommendation would have been 3515 because of the unknown of the cost of the sewer project 8 years from now. If you assume 10 to 15% increase in those project costs every year, if the project comes in over that $5 million, we can no longer afford to do that. And so that was my only concern, was the amount of funds that are available. You know, this is all projections at this point. We don't have any solid numbers. The engineers have given us best available information on the cost of these projects. We can't guarantee that those numbers are going to come in. If we hit ledge for 3/4 of Route 1, or if there's some serious issues along the project, it may come in more expensively. So that would be the only reason for my request to shift it to the 3515, is the unknown of how long it'll take the project to accrue these funds to actually, you know, their projections are year 7 or year 8 would be near full build. You know, if it takes them 10 years to get to full build, so it takes 4 years to get to 30% build, then we're kind of delaying the project even further because the town isn't going to be expending funds that we're not already receiving to do this project, or at least I don't believe they will be. You know, we could go to the town and say, we want to start this project now, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. The tax rate is going to have to reflect that additional cost. That wasn't the plan as we were at least preliminarily projecting this project, is to not start year 1 with a sewer project that's going to cost X amount of dollars and it won't be reimbursable until, you know, we won't have enough money to cover those expenses until year 8. The thought process was to create that sinking fund so that we are depositing money into this account until such time as there's a stream of revenue that's coming in that we know will cover the project. And once that happens, each year after that, there will be the same amount, if not more, revenue coming in yearly, which will get us to the point where we know we can afford to pay those bond costs for the project we want to do. So we don't want to spend the money before we have it. We want to make sure we have a steady stream of revenue so that the debt's covering itself.
And that is your 3515.
It gives us more of a window of opportunity. It gives a little bit of additional funding to that development account in the event that those costs skyrocket.
That would put us at about, after year 6, somewhere around $200,000 in the general fund.
Yes.
Total will be about 4.5. Over the course, 4.5 million.
Yep. And then if we know
Instead
that
of
we're
5 million.
we know we're receiving 2+ a year, we can go out to bond in such a length of time as to meet the TIF district requirements as well as to meet the revenue requirements of that bond.
The underlying predicate, though, is that that project goes forward.
Exactly.
Otherwise, that money sits there,
Absolutely. It doesn't.
does nothing,
Yes, exactly.
unless we
And we're not
opt for
required.
one of the others. then.
Right, we're not required to do the sewer project, that's why there are other projects listed in that development account where, for some reason, Seasonal Cottages decides they're only gonna build 100 units. That's less than half of what they projected. At that point in time, we have to come back and decide which of those projects that we've listed on the application are acceptable because all of the other options are gonna cost too much money. There's no guarantee to the developer that we're going to be putting the sewer in. They'd like to see the sewer go in. As they discussed with us, they would like to possibly pay for the extension of sewer as we pay for it from the Kennebunk River to the campground road. They'd like to pay for it from the campground road to their site. But there's no guarantees to them that we're going to do that, and there's no guarantee whatsoever that the project will actually move forward. If at some point in time, Kennebunk Sewer District says, we can't accept you, period, and the city of Biddeford isn't able to address the issue with us, our hands would be tied at that point. The cost of building our own sewer treatment plant in Arundel and siting it would be prohibitively expensive.
Did you say that there's no guarantee that they would go from the camp, from theirs to the campground room?
No, I said there was no guarantee that we haven't guaranteed them that we're going to go to the campground road. They have indicated they'd like to build their first phase of their septic disposal, and if we do go to the campground, they would go from campground to theirs.
I would ask them to make sure they put that in.
And we would need to get that. Shanna was on vacation last week, and so I'm speaking with her tomorrow to make sure that we can get all those things worked out and everything in there officially. I did speak to the DECD. They recommended against, and the DECD will not approve a credit enhancement agreement. Credit enhancement agreement is something that should be left to, in the vote, should be left to the Board of Selectmen to negotiate with the developer, and per the conditions stipulated in this chart. So if we go with the 3515 model, those figures will be reflected in the application, but the actual credit enhancement agreement is not approved by the DECD, and it's not recommended that that credit enhancement agreement gets approved at town meeting. And I think that was Smitty's educated opinion of credit enhancement agreements in the application process, and once again, I've got to verify that with Shana this week when we talk.
Where would we get the authority to engage in negotiations and enter into a credit agreement?
It would be part of the approval process at town meeting of the TIF that would authorize the Board of Selectmen to negotiate the terms of that credit
So
enhancement.
we have to say something about that.
Exactly. In accordance with these funding
Right.
figures.
So you also mentioned something about that if they choose to only put, instead of the whatever, house, if they, decide that at year 10, I mean, we can renegotiate this, right? Because if they change that scope,
Yes.
then this TIF can be renegotiated.
There'll be language included in that, language in regards to if the project doesn't move as quickly as we thought it was, in the event that the project is abandoned or left as is, so if they stop in year 5, they've built 20 units, and that's all that's going to be there. The terms of the TIF have been breached, and so the TIF can be dissolved because of those defaults. And that's also language that Shanna has to get in there to make sure that we're covered on all bases.
If the TIF is dissolved, then any funds that we have accumulated, can we then use those funds? Or do they have to sit there until we want to use them for one of these projects?
That's a very good question, Norma. And I say that when I don't know the answer, so let me get a response on that. So can, I
We got
believe,
some answer, there were some penalties involved, but
Yeah.
we could take the funds at that point.
if I believe that if the TIF is dissolved and we have money sitting in the development account, TIF is no longer going to move forward, I still believe that we are subject to penalties from the sheltering. So there would be a hit that we would take, albeit a small one, I believe, in regards to general purpose aid to education, county tax, and revenue sharing, where that would, in 1 year, be credited to our valuation, which would cause us to, I believe they would look back X amount of years and penalize us on those sheltered funds. But I will find out from Shanna how that actually works, because that formula, she had indicated that if you know you're not going to use a 50-50 split, do not go 50-50 anticipating to give back money to the general fund later, because that's the point where you get penalized.
But we could leave those funds right there in that account until such time as we were going to work on one of these projects.
Yes, we could.
Okay. It's like a designated, one of our designated funds.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was my only reason for the 35-15 as opposed to the 25-25. 25-25, I believe, would be better received. There may be a better chance of getting it approved at town meeting. But the 35-15 would give us the ability to have a little more wiggle room in that sewer project should that come to fruition.
Maybe I'm a member of the immediate gratification generation, but I don't know, I still think that's kind of pie in the sky, the sewer project. There's so many contingencies that come together to make that work.
I guess I do focus a lot of my conversation on the sewer project. There are other things for those funds to be used on.
But not as much. I mean, that's supposed at 1.6 or 1.8 or.
It's 2 to 6 million,
Right.
depending on, underlying factors on site. Speaking to Mike Boldick at the sewer district, he's not entirely convinced that his ratepayers are going to fund an expansion of that sewer plant, treatment plant, and depending on projected build-out on Route 1 in Arundel, at what point are they going to break even with any upgrades they're gonna do to their plant? So you are right, it's a gamble. We don't know when and if they'll be able to accept us, and when and if this will get to full build-up, to actually start realizing the kind of revenue that we're seeing here.
And we've always got things coming up.
Yeah.
Always something's coming up we need money for, that we unanticipated.
The sewer project is nice, but it affects a small percentage of folks in the town. Will it create more businesses to come? Possibly, but there's really not a whole lot of expansion on Route 1. I mean, I know they're talking about the DB2 to try to help enhance some of that, but I don't know, I agree with Tom. A little sewer project is nice.
I think any area for expansion on Route 1, if they're talking about any type of an industrial park, is good for them.
I think there are more important things in this town.
Okay, well, we have the town manager's recommendation, we have the motion on the floor. We'll take a vote on the motion, and see where we are, all right? The motion right now, as it says, to accept the 50 split with the developer and 25 split between sheltered and not unsheltered funds, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? 4-1. Okay, next item is discuss the recommendations on the town development plan proposals to be included in these.
All right, the final agenda item 6H, we go to page 11. This gives us estimated development costs. These are potential projects that can be completed with the development account when the town feels that we've started accruing enough revenue to move forward with these projects. Tad and I just kind of went up and down Route 1 and bounced ideas off of each other as to what we've heard or what there are for potential projects. Obviously, the sanitary sewer was first and foremost for us because of the potential development that it would provide for Route 1. I believe that the Selectmen did as well weigh in on the priorities of these projects, numbering them 1 through 7. There were some projects initially in there that were eliminated. Lighting for Route 1 was one of them. And now we're down to these projects. It's very obvious that we won't be able to do all of these projects with the funds that we will have coming available. If any of these are, go ahead, Dan.
So you believe that the planning board weighed in on these?
I meant the Board of Selectmen. Did I
No,
say planning
I said
board?
the-
Oh, no.
Maybe I didn't hear you.
The board.
Okay, I know that the planning board does not want sidewalks.
No. No, the planning board didn't have anything to say about this. The Selectmen, I believe, I had brought this to your attention at one point. Some projects were eliminated, and I don't know if it was an official vote or just from the reaction of the board members. This is the list of priorities that we got. Any of these items, we don't have to complete all of these. This is telling the state of Maine, should this project happen, these are what we're considering doing as we move forward. If there's anything that wants to be added, that you'd like added, we can see that it would fit into the development list of permitted uses. If there's anything here you'd like to eliminate, we can do that as well. But this was just to give a basic overview to the State of Maine Department of Economic and Community Development as to what we would do with the funds if the TIP passes and comes to fruition. Natural gas pressure reduction station is on everybody's list, but it typically doesn't happen. They're dealing with some rather interesting snafus in northern Maine, central Maine right now with some of the tips that they've done and some of the natural gas lines that they're working on up there. But this list, I do believe, was vetted through the board, and that's why all of these ended up on this application.
So I don't remember us prioritizing these.
Okay, if
I could be wrong,
I believe the board did, but I'd have to go back and see. No?
I don't believe it.
Well,
I don't think so, but maybe.
No, I don't know the phrase.
Let's try to,
Exactly. I guess.
Because
I remember lighting being on that. That was going away immediately.
Yeah, lighting did.
So
Lighting did a lot of favorable review.
from there, we may have prioritized it on our own. If you would like to prioritize them, remove, add, this is the time to discuss this because it'll cost us a lot less money with the attorneys to have to go through it more than once.
If they prioritize, does that mean that the first amounts of money that come in have to be used on number one?
No, they do not.
And I understood from our discussions earlier that if something else later on were to come to the surface, we'd be able to amend and include that, assuming it fits the other criteria.
That's correct.
All right.
I told Tad if the economic development director gets approved at that rate, I'll be resigning from my position and applying for the economic development director position. He assured me that that included benefits. When he did those figures, he did a tally of communities that have full-time economic development directors, and I'm fairly certain he had to search far and wide outside the state of Maine to find those positions.
Well, personally, sidewalks on Route 1, it's just my, I think that's a waste of money.
Okay.
Can I, one of the things that when I was on the fire department, they talked about a lot was, now that the pressure station, pumping station's been there, increased number of hydrants, would that be something that would be in there? Because there was a goal, I know we had that large structure fire at the boatyard one year, and I know there was talk about increasing the number of hydrants if the pressure got built up. And I think some of the new businesses were required to pay for a new hydrant for 4 or 5 years to help the town to add those.
That's something that would have to be negotiated with the water district. I can look into that if the board's interested in furthering that idea. I'd have to speak with Norm and see how they feel about adding hydrants, what the cost of that would be, how many hydrants they'd recommend. It's something we could look into.
Because adding them might come from here, but then maintaining them would come out of our general budget.
That's correct. So the actual cost, initial costs could come out of this, but the maintenance and the annual fees would have to be paid to the general fund. Or through the regular tax
But I
revenue.
would think it would give businesses that little incentive if you know you've got a piece of land that's got a hydrant right in front of it.
What's, do you know what the cost is per hydrant yearly? Cost?
We have some contracts in the fall that we had set up with a few businesses that we can probably pull.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know. I think it does, it is right
I
around
think it was
1,000.
1,000 a year or something like that.
For all of them, though, right?
No,
No,
it's
that was
20,000.
I think
There's
we-
something, there's a budget item for hydrants.
Yeah, $22,000 for hydrants. Do we
Right.
So it's like,
know
you know,
that, Jason?
15 to 20.
Yeah, so we're looking at about $1,000 a year for hydrants. 22,000 is the line item.
You don't have that
So I
one
don't
on
know
Route
how
1
many
right
there
now,
are.
though. You don't-
No, I think
Is that
there's
what
8
Captain
on Route
Road was trying
1.
to say, there's not that many.
Yeah, that's in total, the
In total.
total number, that budget line goes to the entirety, so. I could
I
have
know
to
some of
guess-
that goes to dry hydrant
Yes,
maintenance, so.
I could have to guess that there'd be quite a few to be added on Route 1 if we were to go through something of that nature. And it could be fairly expensive undertaking, so that's why I'd have to talk to Norm Labby and see if they would, A, be interested, and B, they could give us a ballpark of what that would cost.
Why would they not be interested?
Oh, sometimes it doesn't fit into their business model. To be honest with
But
you,
it would
sometimes
be
they.
paid for by this.
Yeah. But if their supply, I know their pressure is,
Pressure, volume.
they've got plenty of volume, but they've got plenty of pressure, but they might not have the volume where they're expanding in other areas. They have to consider the total demand on their system. So there may be a case where they say, it's just not worth for us to put those hydrants there.
If there was a major fire on Route 1, we'd be tapping hydrants all up and down Route 1 anyways, right?
Yep.
Mr. Fritz?
There is a hydrant in front of my place. There is hydrants on.
There is one right in front of you?
Front of my driveway coming out of my house.
Now, did they put that in, or did you put that in?
No, that's on the opposite side of the road where the water runs.
I'm gonna make a guess. They're like every 2,000 feet right now, probably, roughly? 2,500 feet?
If the board is interested in moving forward with this, I'll speak to Norm as soon as I can get in touch with him and see if he has a ballpark. Of how many we'd need, where they'd be located, and the costs associated with that, that's not a problem at all.
Is that something that a business would be concerned? I mean, I know if for insurance rates, sometimes that means something if you're close to a hydrant. But do you think that draws a business where there are hydrants close?
Building code these days, I know in a commercial building, they require you to sprinkle the building anyway.
Right.
So whether or not that would be a selling point on win or lose a business, I don't know.
I'm just trying to think, the underlying basis is economic, going economic activity. I mean, if it does, fine, but if it's meaningless, I don't know.
Yeah, I know from a planning board perspective, it's always brought up, whether it draws them or deters them. I don't know.
Something to make them pay for it.
Yeah.
What was the cost of the standalone sewer sanitary system? Like 20 million?
Yeah, we got ballpark figures between 20 and 40 million for a drop-in plant. And then
That's just a plant, right?
Barry said, yeah, that's not operating costs, that's not staffing. And then I believe Barry had said, and I'm pulling this off the top of my head because when he said it to me, it sounded ridiculous. But I think he said $800,000 in permit fees with DEP and then EPA to actually be able to, first of all, we'd have to site it. And the water quality, to my understanding of the river, doesn't meet the standards to even consider placing a plant on the river. But I believe Barry Sheff had told us approximately we could figure ballpark $800,000 in permitting fees. So it was a very, very expensive proposition. And you can get a smaller system for $2 or $3 million, but it wouldn't handle the need that we have here in Arundel. So he had ballparked us at 20 to 40. It's a big ballpark and there's a huge variance there, but that's still way outside the scope of anything that we could consider.
And we couldn't split room one, like half to Biddeford, half to Kendall?
If they wanted to do it, we could. The problem with going to Biddeford is it's a pressure, it would be a pressurized line all the way. There's the crossing of the railroad, which is always an issue. I don't know if you can hang sewer off of a bridge or if you have to directional bore under. Phil, do you know if you can hang sewer off of an overpass?
I don't think you can.
So you'd have to
They
bore
go
under, and the railway, it's difficult to deal with the railroad folks. They don't like it when you molest their lines, to be honest. But it is a potential Biddeford. When I first came here, I've known John Bouvier and Al Casanet. I've known Al my entire life. I've known John a very long time. And they had said, if you're ever interested in sewer, these are the obstacles. It's something that they'd be interested in doing, but it would be a pressurized system for the entirety of that sewer line and crossing the railroad. So it would be more expensive to, even though it may be a shorter distance from that end of town, it'd be more than likely be more expensive to go to Biddeford with that.
So all the figure that Barry quoted you, that's just a plant itself, that's not running lines down the
That's
line
correct.
and.
That was independent of, that was just the treatment plant itself. Then, depending on, where along the river we can place it, then we're looking at a whole different animal, because now, depending on where that's sited, will depend on whether or not it's more beneficial to begin sewering residential in subdivisions and head up, if we can work a deal with Unitil to get a sewer line in there right of way and going and trying to hit that part of town rather than going down. More than likely, the initial conversation came up when we first started looking at the Limerick Road site. It was a kind of a harebrained thing. I had said to Tad, hey Tad, if we could get that entire piece and just stick a treatment plant down there, we'd be all set. And Barry Sheff was there meeting with us that day, and he laughed, and then a week later I got an email from him about the sewer plant you were talking about. He said this is what it would probably cost you. But the costs of extending the line would be considerably different. We would no longer be looking at the 2 to 3.6 million because we would be doing more than that mile and a half, mile and 3/4 down Route 1.
You have more problems crossing the Unitil line than you would railroad.
Across the railroad, probably, we run into roadblocks on both ends.
Unitil is very sticky both ends.
Yeah, but we didn't go any further with that conversation about the treatment plant because just the initial projections were so out there, we'd never be able to outweigh that cost.
Well, I mean, for the sake of the list, I mean, because it can always be changed. I mean, there are some things there. I mean, we may not all agree on all of these things, but, you know, there's a list there, and if something like Tom said, something pops up down the road.
And, you know, as negative as it may be to think this way, even if only a small portion of that project gets approved, and we were just to attack a revolving business loan program, that would stimulate business development along Route 1 and be able to, you know, justify the costs if we can bring in the right type of businesses that'll offset, you know, a big enough business that it will have an impact on the mill rate. So that's, you know, that's one option that we have, and the others may not come to fruition, but maybe at some point there'll be grant funding available. It was a conversation we had, was grant funds available for pressure reduction stations. If, you know, finally, let's say this out loud, but the Maine Auto Dealers Association can get their grip off of the legislature will actually set out some grant funds to be able to explore and expand natural gas. It might become cost effective where we have 600,000 and then there's matching funds from the USRDA or from, you know, some entities going to match funds. That is a possibility, and that is a very easy way to spur economic development anywhere in town. I mean, we have two pipelines that run through town here that just run through town. You know, there's not much being done with them.
I think between that and the revolving loan program, to me, those are the top ones.
Yep.
You know, to give it a business incentive and say, you know, we'll give you a revolving loan, I mean, to me, that's huge.
Yep.
I would agree with that too, although I'm frightened about the banking business, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I completely understand that.
Also the traps, where you have to be very careful, but that seems to me the most immediate and effective use of these funds, is possibly if somebody were to come looking for assistance.
So if there's no major changes, I'll present this to Shanna, that was Shauna, I never say it right, the attorney, and if you think of anything, or decide at a later time that we just aren't going to pursue X, Y, or Z, we can eliminate it at that point. It's easier to eliminate than to add.
I'd be curious as to what the rest of the board thinks about Route 1 sidewalks.
Yeah. What does the rest of the board think about Route 1 sidewalks?
Maybe I'm not seeing something.
No offense, but I just don't want to see a whole lot of skateboarders at Route 1.
Yeah. What was the point of sidewalks on Route 1? I mean,
I think
What were they
it's, part
doing?
of it is that whole expansion of your businesses into a DB1, DB2, and kind of connecting things. So I don't think it's necessarily sidewalks necessarily right on Route 1 as it is to interconnect businesses, maybe?
Well,
Yeah,
there,
on.
there was conversation about sidewalks right on Route 1. The reason I think that initially came up is, once again, grant funding. If you call it a downtown and it's a walking downtown, you have a better chance of securing grant monies for that downtown. So as all of these zones started getting renamed and reconfigured, I believe it was Tad's idea that the downtown idea of an old-fashioned downtown USA where, you know, there's a storefront, there's an apartment upstairs, there's a sidewalk that services all of those properties. Route 1 and Arundel might be a little too spread out to do the entirety of the downtown. In the future, there may be a push or an interest from businesses to come in and develop their, you know, if a block can be purchased and developed and sidewalks put in, maybe that would, you know, have the sidewalk to nowhere, but I think that's how the whole idea started, was to try to secure, there's safer routes to school monies, there's, healthy communities monies, there's different money available if you have a downtown. CDBG funds, redevelopment funds, a lot of those hinge around the idea of a downtown. And I think that's, the initial idea was to create a downtown as the conversation first started. I think now the districts have changed so much, having gone through the planning board, that I don't believe a Route 1 sidewalk would even, there'd be nowhere to put it. We'd have to take the right of way. It would most certainly guarantee that DOT was gonna say to the town of Arundel, here you go, we're gonna pave Route 1 one more time, it's yours. And we would then be responsible for the maintenance and care of Route 1. That's the next step, is you do enough things to Route 1, DOT comes to you and says, okay, we're gonna fix this the last time, now it's yours. I believe that maybe what the state's doing on West Street in Bedford, because the state's gonna once again pave West Street in Bedford, and that section of road technically belongs to the state of Maine. And I think that'll be handed back over to the city of Bedford. I was told from Ray Parent in Bedford that the state of Maine owns from 5 Points to Wilcox Pond. They're redoing that section of road, and I think that there was a lot of it that came around, it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where the state decided we're gonna change once again what we do. We receive URIP funds in the town of Arundel, and every other community in the state of Maine receives funds from the state of Maine to maintain the roads that we maintain for them. They were going to come through, fix roads to the 10-year standard. So they would have gone, they would have completely reconstructed the Log Cabin Road, and then when it was done, they would have done the drainage. Now this is, theoretically, they would have done the drainage, they would have cut the trees, they would have fixed the road, they would have taken care of everything, and at that point in time, they would have said, okay, Arundel, not only do you take care of this road in the wintertime now, you'll also take care of it in the summertime. Well, with that came more problems, because the way they were going to do it, it was going to require, the way they were exchanging these roads was going to require DOT to be plowing 1.5-mile stretches of roads in towns where they didn't have to do anything else. So then, once again, now we're not giving you the money, we're giving you the road, and eventually we're going to tell you, you need to fix that part. You need to maintain that section that we're now maintaining, and that kind of went away. They were going to eliminate URIP, give us more money, and give us the roads, and that never came to fruition. So,
Route 1, that's not a West Street, that's a major
there aren't many.
thoroughfares, and how many towns in the state of Maine that have the state said, you take care of Route 1?
And I was told Bedford, it wasn't that long ago that the state used to take care of Route 1. But as soon as you hit 7,500 population, it becomes something totally different. And then if we begin developing Route 1, now we become a DOT urban compact zone, and that's a handover, here you go, this is yours, you take care of it. So X amount of development, or 3,500 more people in the town of Arundel, and we'll own Route 1. Or some other negotiation that the Transportation Committee decides to bring to the community. I don't believe they'll be taking any back, let's put it that way.
Well, the sidewalks, obviously for what's there today, doesn't fit. I mean, Tad's vision is, it's gonna take 10, 20 years or whatever to change, but, sidewalks, maintenance, plowing, it adds a lot more to our budget.
$200,000 piece of equipment right there. No matter how you shake it, clean a sidewalk. We have
I wouldn't have a problem if that wasn't in there.
We have 0.2 miles of sidewalks in front of it. I think that's how Roger would keep it.
Yeah. I mean, that's my opinion. If that wasn't there, I wouldn't have a problem with that, because we have other things that are much more important than, to me, than putting sidewalks on Route 1.
Jason, you want to weigh in on sidewalk? Nope.
111, can we shoot for a sidewalk on 111? Like from my house to Whitaker Crossing?
Yeah.
Why we're selectmen, make these decisions, and make these comments, we get voted in.
I mean, again, if we don't put it in there,
Yep.
and then something comes up that it is something that is necessary, we can always amend it.
We can.
But I don't,
in the same manner, you just go to town, either a special town meeting or an annual town meeting and request to amend the application to do, address a project that comes up that we realize we didn't get in this list, and that makes a lot of sense. That's very easy to do. And if we're not going to do a project, we don't need to remove it. It's just there because it has a potential need.
Anything else, folks?
I guess we're gonna leave it.
No harm, no foul, folks.
All right.
Okay, so next step in the process is what, have council's reviewing this?
That is correct.
And we're gonna remove our neighbors.
Yes, we are. That will be part of the application.
Okay, next item then is to update Selectmen on MDOT's plans with respect to the Hill Road intersection.
Everybody sitting down in the audience?
Yeah.
Steve is going to signalize the intersection at the Hill Road. There will be a red light on the Hill Road. There will be vehicles rear-ended on Route 111 until people realize that there's a red light on the Hill Road. There will still be a turning lane.
Might be better than T-bone.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. There will be a turning lane as you head west on 111 to turn onto the Hill Road, but there will not be any other turning lanes, no turning lanes on the Hill Road that they've told me about. A lot of the conversations that I've heard is people thought that there should possibly be a turning lane coming off of the Hill Road to go west on 111, so to take that right-hand turn. That's not the case at this point in time. There's still engineers that are looking at different design proposals for this. DOT hasn't settled on one. They're looking to have a public hearing in Arundel end of May, and they should have all of the information available at that time. I spoke to Roger, and I don't recall if I spoke to you folks about this, about the no-through trucks, and the fact that our end is posted at 7 ton, the other end is posted at 5 ton. That meets the requirement that DOT is looking for. If they may recommend just posting that to no-through trucks, that's something that the Board of Selectmen can consider and approve on their own without having to go to town meeting. So that is, don't know how long it's been on the 5-year plan, but that's slated for spring of 2015. So that would be next construction season that they're planning to do this project. As I indicated in an email I sent to you, I'm going to try to get people who are going to attend the public hearing to mention to DOT staff that it would be a good idea if DOT paid for the maintenance and repair of that street light, the electricity costs. I don't think that stands a chance, but it's worth it to get the people to say it, because I've already told them that I think that they should be paying for their own street lights.
Enforcement.
So enforcing it on us. Unfunded mandate, yeah. So that's where they're at on that project, and they will keep us posted, and I will let you know when they try to schedule that public hearing.
Could we request them, when they put a light there, to reduce the speed limit coming down? That would prevent some rear-enders,
Yeah.
probably.
The board could most certainly do that, and I believe that would happen, not positive, but I believe that would happen anyway with a light in that area, that they would have to reduce the speed limit a little so that people knew that that light was coming.
Right.
But I can ask Ernie about that, no problem.
So that would be, I think that they would, if they would reduce the speed limit heading back to Biddeford, crank it back up to, what is that, 50 or 55?
50.
Crank it back up to 50 for like half a mile, but it'd probably stay 35 all the way. That would make the
Kate's.
butter happy.
Yeah. I will check with Ernie and see if that's something that they're considering, but I think there's rules in regards to approaches to lights, and it's not a complete straightaway approaching that, so I think they'd have to address that.
Because right now you have the 45 along the bank is by your house. It goes down to 45 and it goes
It stays that way all the way
all
to,
the way to
Other
the
side of
Donuts,
Jackson's.
I think Jackson's.
Yeah, other side of that, JD, over where the turf farm is, and then it goes back to 55, I think, possibly.
Yes, yeah.
And I think the light at the campground road, I think the speed limit goes to 45 right about by, just beyond, Mr. Fritz, I think the speed limit goes down to 45, and they're coming up to the light at the campground road.
Actually, it's just before you get to my place.
Just, I know it's there somewhere. Yeah.
So a right-hand turn heading west, yeah, that really doesn't make sense, because you know, if you're gonna head west, you could go, what's the name of that road?
Truck Road.
Truck Road. Yeah.
Oh, I think that right turn is worse than the Hill Road right turn. Coming off Trout Brook.
Kind of uphill, and you got, what's the other one, the other
Thompson
side?
Road.
Thompson Road.
Coming
And that's that. I'll let you know when they schedule the public hearing, and if there's any further information that comes from DOT, I'll keep you apprised of that.
Okay, need to approve the payroll and pay the payables one.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, any old business?
No, sir.
Okay, moving on to other business. We have a resignation to inform us of that.
Yes, Deputy Treasurer will be leaving effective May 5th, and has posted that job on the municipal website as well as jobs in ME and other locations, so the kind of position open in town hall.
Yeah.
Place closer to home.
And also the mechanics job open, huh?
Yes, Roger told me I could hold off on that job for a little while. Roy left on March 28th, and about a week ago, Roger started knocking on my door saying, "Where's my mechanic?" So hopefully we'll have better luck than Kennybunk did. Kennybunk just posted the same position, fleet mechanic. They only had 9 applications, so I'm hopeful that we're going to get a little bit more of a response than that, but that job is posted as well, Maine Municipal Association and jobsinMU.com, and on our website. And hopefully we'll find a candidate that meets the requirements.
Okay. That's the end of my agenda.
Jack had his hand up for something. I don't
I'm
know.
sorry, Jack.
Yes, just a comment back on Bill Street. It seems to me that it might be useful to have the sheriff there with his several-year statistics to just help the departments move along in their efforts.
They actually quoted several statistics to me when I spoke to DOT, so.
I'm sure they have it, or they wouldn't be.
Oh, to have at the public hearing.
Have the sheriff there at the meeting,
Okay.
just to emphasize the importance.
Just correct to do that.
While they're at it, can they do the Limerick Road too?
That one's not on the docket yet, Fred's why. I'll put the
You ever
bucket
try to
area.
get out of there at 4:30 at night?
Oh, I do once a day.
That one's easier than the new road.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't head west on 111 off the new road. But no, I do. I sit there every day at the Limerick Road intersection.
6 or 7 cars back.
Yep, absolutely. But when the fire happened on 111, that was an
To
interesting
that
proposition.
point, maybe the sheriff could have data on that intersection for that evening.
Well, if there's something else, I can look to adjourn. All in favor? Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, Alex. What's up? I'll email it to you. Yeah, I can do that. It's all preliminary. I'll be very clear about that in my email, but you can take a look at it, no problem. You're welcome.